Hello and welcome to the Mormon Yeshiva. This presentation is entitled The Astro-Theology of the Book of Mormon, Nephi's Boat, and the Land of Bountiful. Again, please make note of our fair use disclaimer. Everything here is just for educational purposes. As we go through Nephi's journey in the wilderness, what we often do not realize is that in the Israelite mindset, we're taking a journey through the Maserut. And again, the Maserut are the things of the stars, the zodiac. So the idea of journeying in the wilderness is a symbolic expression for a person or someone journeying in the Maserut or the zodiac. And like it says, this is here in verse 1 in chapter 14. And it came to pass that we did again take our journey into the wilderness, and we did travel nearly eastward from that time forth. And we did travel and wade through much affliction in the wilderness, and our women did bear children in the wilderness. Well, from the prior presentation, in where we talked about, the different directions of the zodiac, displays, eastward is toward the constellation Libra, with Cancer being at the north, Aries being in the west, and Capricorn being in the south. So in a sense, as we travel in the wilderness, we're traveling eastward toward Libra. Now, where did these concepts of these animals come from? Well, when we read the book of Genesis, in our Western mind, we often think, okay, God brought all the beasts of the field to Adam. In Genesis 2:20 and 21, it says here, and out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast out of the field, and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And Adam gave names to all the cattle, and to all the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. Now, in a literal sense, we understand this to mean that Adam named all the animals, like in the forest, if you will. But on a symbolic level, it's the idea in ancient Israel that he named all of the constellations. That's why a lot of the constellations are animals, and that you are in the forest or in the wilderness kind of thing. So if you've ever wondered how in the world did any of these people get these symbols of, say, a lion for Leo, or an eagle for Scorpio, or even a scorpion for Scorpio. The idea is that you'll see these same animals used almost cross-culturally, not in every culture, but in a lot of the main cultures in especially the Middle East. But the idea comes, at least in Israelite thought, back to the ideas that Adam named all of the beasts of the field, or in other words, the constellations and the animals in the zodiac or the Maserut. So it goes on. And so great were the blessings of the Lord upon us, that we did live upon raw meat in the wilderness. Our women did give plenty of suck for their children, and were strong, yes, even like unto the men. And they began to bear their journeyings without murmurings. And thus we see that the commandments of God must be fulfilled. And if it so be that the children of men keep the commandments of God, he doth nourish them, and strengthen them, and provide means whereby they can accomplish the things which he has commanded them. Wherefore he did provide us means for us, while we did sojourn in the wilderness. And we did sojourn for the space of many years, yes, even 8 years. So that 8 is a very key number there. But the idea behind the animals, or the characters that make up the Maserut or the zodiac, is that these are the animals that provide the flesh, if you will, that bring them nourishment in the wilderness. In other words, this is a description that the stars and the symbols of the Maserut have something to do with spiritual nourishment. So there's a connection here between what he's teaching us in regard to the stars and astronomy and astronomical and astro-theological symbolism and spiritual nourishment. And specifically, we should be looking at that, what we see in verse 4. It says, yes, they were there even 8 years in the wilderness. So if we look at verse 4 again, notice what it says. It gives us a really interesting key. And we did sojourn in the space for many years, yes, even 8 years in the wilderness. The Hebrew word chet, okay, is a fence or a field, but it's also the Hebrew letter assigned to the constellation of Cancer, or the crab, which is where we also find, and what we've talked about previously in our other presentations, that Cancer is the top of the mountain. It is the summer solstice, the house that contains the summer solstice. But the number 8 there tells us we are now in the house of Cancer. So as we've said, Cancer is in the north. If you look over here to this diagram to the left here, you'll see that the north, or Cancer, is considered the top of the mountain. Capricorn, like at the south, is a goat, and imagine Capricorn in a sense like a goat climbing to the top of a mountain. It ascends, and we ascend the zodiac. We go through Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, until we reach Cancer, and then of course we go back down the mountain from Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and then the cycle commences again. So if we look at this particular diagram, it gives us an idea of where Cancer is in relation to the idea of it being a mountain and an astro-theological symbol. So Cancer, in many ways, is actually considered symbolically the land bountiful because of its many animals and it's where it is at on the idea of the Maserut. So when we come to the land which we call bountiful, because of its much fruit and also wild honey. So sometimes, like we've talked about in the past, sometimes we read over little details, and these little details actually contain more descriptive information, and the writer is actually trying to give us a little more depth to what he's talking about. So he symbolically encrypted additional information into the narrative of his story. So in this case, it says they came to the land bountiful, in other words, symbolized by the constellation Cancer, because of its much fruit and also wild honey. Wild honey is a marker for us because it describes another actual constellation associated with Cancer. And all these things were prepared of the Lord that we might not perish. And we beheld the sea, which we called Iriantum, and which, being interpreted, is many waters. So, what is this wild honey? Well, and like it says, we came to the land which we call bountiful because of its much fruit and also wild honey. Well, associated with the constellation in the house of Cancer is the Beehive Cluster. And I always slaughter this pronunciation, but I believe it's Precipe. It is the Beehive Cluster associated with the constellation Cancer. And so the idea it is the land flowing with milk and honey. In this case, we also see the idea of wild honey being associated with honeybees or the Beehive Cluster in the constellation Cancer. But what is the seashore? Well, the Milky Way. The Milky Way, the Great Sea, or the Great River, sometimes it's called. It says, it came to pass that we did pitch our tents, and notice that phraseology there, pitch our tents. When you see that phrase, pitch our tents, that's one of 3 specific prophetic phrases in the Torah that helps you to understand that you are visualizing something to do not only with the temple teaching, but with the astronomy and the astronomical teachings of the fathers in the end of the ancient world. And says, so they did pitch their tents, again, prophetic key phrase, by the seashore, in this case, the Milky Way. And notwithstanding, we had suffered many afflictions and much difficulty, yes, even so much that we cannot write them all. We were exceedingly rejoiced when we came to the seashore, and we called the place Bountiful because of its much fruit. If you look at many of the stars and also many of the symbols that were associated with the house of Cancer and or the constellation Cancer, and where it's at in relationship to the Milky Way, you're approaching the seashore, you'll begin to see that he's using the stars to draw a picture for us. So not only does he have the literal story going on, he's also giving us ancient astronomical teachings. Now, Let's take a look a little bit closer here. Nephi's ship and Cancer, or in the land Bountiful. Notice in verse 7, "And it came to pass that after I, Nephi, had been in the land of Bountiful for the space of many days, the voice of the Lord came unto me, saying, Arise and get thee up into the mountain." Okay, get thee up in the mountain, the heights of the mountain. The top of the mountain is Cancer. Okay, it's at the very north, the top, considered the top of the mountain of the Lord's house. And that's that particular constellation. So, in a sense, Nephi is arising to the top of the mountain. "And it came to pass that I arose and went up unto the mountain and cried unto the Lord." So we're given a symbol there that we're nowhere at the top of the mountain. Okay, then notice what it says. It says, "And it came to pass that the Lord spake unto me, saying, Thou shalt construct a ship, after the manner which I shall show thee, that I may carry thy people across these waters." Now the constellation Argo, the ship, is the third and final decan belonging to Cancer, the crab. It is a picture of a huge ship sailing across the night sky, sails furled, oars rowing forward, as if backing the ship into its dock, in a sense. It was anciently known and was called the boat or the ship of Osiris, Orion, Nephi, associated with Nephi. So in a sense, by looking at these constellations in the sky, Nephi is painting a picture not only of his journey to the promised land, but he's written his story in a way to show you that while he did construct a ship, there's also an ancient teaching regarding the particular constellations of Cancer, the constellation Argo in the house of Cancer, as well as the Beehive Cluster, and them taking journey into the Great Sea, if you will, the sea, or the Milky Way. So he's drawing these prophetic and symbolic astronomical word pictures. And these things are, again, connected with the ideas of the language of the stars, the language of angels, and it also is connected to the idea of spiritual nourishment. So these are elements of the Book of Mormon that are interwoven into the text that no 18 to 21-year-old young boy in the state of New York with limited education would ever be able to find out. And I know there's this crazy theory going on right now that people are trying to say, oh, he really went to Dartmouth College. Okay, even Dartmouth College at that time was pretty much one or two buildings. They didn't have the extensive libraries we have. They obviously didn't have the internet. And people of Joseph Smith's caliber did not have access to this type of information or literary skills to be able to even weave this type of story. Not only using ancient Hebraic symbols that he would never have any knowledge of, but to be able to interweave it into a text that not only describes an actual astronomical narrative, but also gives us a symbolic narrative in regard to, for example, wild honey, teachings of the fathers. These are ancient symbols that are interwoven and done in such a way that no commoner, no group of rabbis could have put this together in this type of intricacy and detail. So when people come about and say, oh, he made it up, I challenge anybody to show me how, or to even provide a source document. Because the truth be told, they can't. So as we go and we take this journey around the Maserut and the Astro-Theology of the Book of Mormon, we begin to see that the text contains multidimensional information. It is truly a sealed book in that much information is compacted and encrypted into the text. Very much after the pattern of the ancient Middle East and of the Torah, as well as many of the prophets and the writings and that make up what we call the Old Testament. These particular writings were all written in this way that it uses a historical narrative, but it is composed in such a way to contain much more ancient knowledge such as astronomy, mathematics, language, biology. It all depends on your approach to the particular script you are reading and what type of revelation you are seeking. Because remember, our God is not just a one-dimensional or two-dimensional being. He is a multi-dimensional being. And it would truly take a God to be able to inspire someone to compose a record of this nature on so many different levels while telling one story and yet communicating a multifaceted information and teachings that no mortal man in of himself could truly put together. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and take it in the spirit which it was meant, and have a good day. Thank you very much.